thanks for watching. So real quick, Merkabah Scholar Society members, make sure you guys check your email for the new video, Occult Science, as well as the new stock market video. I had to wait to put out stock market because you know what happened yesterday. Huge day in the market, a lot of changes. So I know a lot of guys is going crazy and scratching their head, but make sure you guys watch the video so you can get the updated information on what all that is about, what's really going on with that situation. But yeah, we'll talk about it in the next meeting. Let's get into this video. So now, if you know me, one of the terms I cannot fucking stand is the term Sub-Saharan Africa or Sub-Saharan African. Can't stand it. So as I talked about before, this term was created to steal the identity and the history of North African people. Now, most people in North Africa believe that North Africa was always white or always light skinned, right? That Europeans and Arabs were always in North Africa. No black Africans were ever there. Sounds crazy when you understand history and who was here first and everything like that. The entirety of Africa, majority dark skin, but somehow North Africa escaped this fate. So we know what happened with South Africa, what have you. But since the history of North Africa is so old and, you know, amazing things are up there, they want to steal this history, but it's real easy to really get through this whole thing. So in this video, we're going to really crush this whole argument and show you, one, before anybody called Romans or Berbers or Arabs were ever in North Africa, there was already black Africans in North Africa, period, right? So we're going to get through that whole nonsense, answer the question of who the Berbers really were and who the Moors really were, because there's a lot of confusion around that as well. So a lot of people just have this notion that, you know, somehow black people, you know, never were in North Africa, but it's real easy to get through this. So one, as I said, before these people ever came in there, black Africans was already there. So it says here, yes, according to historical evidence, the majority of the population in North Africa before the Roman and Arab conquests were considered black or dark skinned, primarily belonging to the Berber ethnic group, also known as the Amazigh, who were the indigenous inhabitants of the region. This is supported by ancient texts and the term Morai, meaning dark ones, which was used to describe the North African population at the time, right? Scroll down here, is telling you, following the Arab conquest, a process of Arabization and Islamization occurred, which significantly influenced the culture and demographics of North Africa, leading to a blending of ethnicities. That's important. It also says here, according to historical records, yes, black Africans, specifically the Balfour people, were already inhabiting the territory of present-day Mauritania before the arrival of Berber tribes who migrated south from North Africa around the 3rd century BC, around the 3rd century CE, essentially meaning black Africans were present in Mauritania before the Berbers. Now, this is crazy here because it's saying that before the arrival of Berber tribes who migrated south from North Africa, right? So this is crazy. So one, we're talking about in Mauritania. So this is Mauritania right here. So, I mean, you can't go no more north from here. So where did they migrate from? They had to already be in Mauritania. Where did they migrate from? So if you're migrating south from North Africa in Mauritania, you're already in Mauritania. So that's crazy. But, you know, you look, it says down here, the Balfour considered ancestors of the Soninke. Soninke people are recognized as the original inhabitants of Mauritania. And the Soninke are right here. And all of these countries here in Africa, basically these people can trace back to the Soninke. The Soninke established the Ghana Empire. These people have been around for a long time. We can trace everything back to these people in that area. And they migrated north. They've been around there, had this territory long before any European and Arab invasion. And I'm gonna go back right here, right, where it's saying Amazigh. So these people, which Amazigh in Berber basically means free man, right? Free man. Now we're talking about people who if we're calling these people Arab, there's no term. We didn't enslave any Arabs in Africa. So why would they want to be called by the term of free man, right? So you have Amazigh and you have another Berber term, Imrajin, right? Which means fishermen. You can still find the Imrajin people over there in West Africa, still fishing to this day. And as you can see clearly, they're black. Now go back here, it says, Berber migration. Berber tribes began migrating southward from North Africa around the 3rd century, displacing the existing black African population. This migration led to social hierarchy where the Berber populations often held power over the indigenous black Africans. Now it says over here, from the 3rd to 7th centuries, The migration of Berber tribes from North Africa displaced the Balfours, the original inhabitants of present-day Mauritania, and the ancestors of the Seninki. Continued Arab-Berber migration drove indigenous Black Africans south to the Senegal River or enslaved them, right? So understand, for the people who believe that the Berbers were Arabs, right? So understand who the Berber really were. The Berbers were Black, plain and simple. The Berbers were Black, but they were also mixed in with Europeans. So you had a group of Berbers who was a mix of Black and European and Black, right? So why would they have the term Arab Berber if the Berbers were Arabs? So for the people who believe that the Berbers were Arab, and this is who history is talking about, why would they have the term Arab Berbers? So you have Berbers who were Africans, Black, and European, white. And then later on, the Arabs would mix in. And that's basically what you have in, Morocco right now. These people have no idea of their ethnicity or what they really are or their own history because they don't know where to look. But this is the truth of where these people come from and who they really are. Now it says here, Arabization. The Arab conquest of North Africa in the 7th century brought Islam and Arabic to the region. The Berber population adopted Islam but kept their own language, which is Berber. Berber is a language. The Arabic language was given a privileged status in North Africa, which contributed to the shift from Berber to Arabic. Today, many Berbers don't like being called Berber because it's not a term native to North Africa. Many Berbers prefer to be called by tribal or regional names or by the term Imazigin, which means free man in Berber. Let's look at Moors real quick. Before Islam, the Moors were people who lived in the Roman province of Mauritania, which is now part of North Africa. The term Moor comes from the Latin word moris, which was used to describe the inhabitants of this region. Origin of the term Moor. We know Moor is also from Greek. I'm just going to scroll here real quick. It says the term Morai was adopted into Latin and then became Moors in English. The term Moors was also used to describe dark-skinned or Black people. So now, since we know history has been whitewashed and covered up because they don't want you to know this history. So clear as day, when you Google Moor, they show you pictures, they'll show you the Arab Moors or the Berber Moors, right? So clearly, if you want to, why wouldn't you just say Arabs? Or, it wouldn't be a distinction behind that name if it was attributed to a people that is already known, like Black or Arab or European. So this Berber name was created to describe a people who was mixed because they didn't have mulatto back then and they didn't say mixed and nobody really cared about it because there wasn't no race thing back then. They didn't care about race so much, but they called them Berber because they couldn't call them Africans because they was mixed. The group was a different ethnic group to them. So when you see Moor, clear as day, you can see Moors that are Black. You can see Moors that are Arab looking, right? And we see them dressed in the style of Islamic dress. You have to understand, as people who don't study history, that this was after conquest. So I just read to you. You can go look it up for yourself. One, we know when the Arabs came over, they brought in Islam, right? They brought in the Arab culture and customs, which the Africans fled. They wasn't the ones that stayed where you were killed, enslaved, or they mixed in and they become what we see today in Morocco. But majority of those people fled, south of the Sahara. And you have now the Berbers coming up and becoming who later on will be known as Moors. But then we know Spain is right there. We know a lot of those people fled north into Spain. And they had the Blackamoors, another word that they use to differentiate between the Berber Moors or the Arab Berbers or the Arab Moors, right? You have the Blackamoors. So one, we can see in history when you want to go look, you can see what happened to these people, how they was displaced and where they went, and that the original people were dark-skinned, Black-skinned. And you look over there today, a lot of these people just look straight up white because you got to remember what happened later on. The Romans started to come into North Africa. They started to come over into Morocco. The Romans, they were already set up and established in Liberia. And they've been in Libya, I should say. They've been in Libya for, since BC times, a long time. So they were already established and set up there to basically keep their eye on, North Africa, Egypt in particular. So now you just have to look at North African history, right? Look at what was going on there throughout history. And then it just tell you everything. History shows you everything. Now, one of the things you got to understand is whenever we have an industrial revolution, which we've been having them since the 19th century. Since the 1830s, we know in Britain, we had the combustion engine, right? We had everything happening in the 1870s with the manufacturing and everything like that. And then we know in 1882, Britain coming into Egypt, right? So we've seen so many depictions and pictures. I've shown you guys a lot of those photos between the 1880s and the 1930s of Britain and Egypt. So it's a lot of depictions you can see there, a lot of pictures you can look and see where you can see clearly the indigenous people of Egypt were dark skinned, as I showed you. So now all you got to do is pay attention to history and look at throughout history. Whenever there's an industrial revolution, there's major changes throughout the world. And understand they're in Africa, understanding the resources that is there. So look at the history of North Africa, what was going on there, who was in there. So we know 1830s, we get, the Industrial Revolution with the steam engine in Britain, telegraph and all that, right? We have in 1870 with the telephone and electricity being created. And then we have in 1882 is when Britain goes into Egypt. So 1882, Britain's in Egypt fighting against the Egyptians and the Sudanese, right? So you have the people in Sudan, black as hell, as we know, uniting with the Arab people, fighting against the British, which of course we know the British won and basically occupied in Egypt for a long time. So it's 1882. What happened in 1884, right? The Berlin Conference. The Berlin Conference is where Leopold famously said, I don't want to miss out on a slice of this marvelous African cake. So they were basically there dividing up Africa. Pay attention to the countries that were there, because this is important and it's for you to understand what's going on and to give you some kind of insight to what's actually going on. I talk about this a lot. Understand, regardless of what you think, there is no America versus Russia. There's no America versus China. All of these leaders are on the same team. They're all together. Plain and simple. History shows you that. And here's one of the reasons how you can prove it right here. History shows you. So one, pay attention to these countries that was there, right, at the Berlin Conference, right? So we have Britain in Egypt. You have the Berlin Conference. What happens after that? So we know 1896, right? The Battle of Ottawa. You have Menelik II going against Rome, right? Going against Rome, and they defeat Rome because Rome has invaded Ethiopia. They already had Eritrea, and now they're trying to get into Ethiopia, and they're invading. And Menelik II, who they basically outnumbered the Romans like 3-1. They defeated them. Easy. It's a history that is celebrated still in Ethiopia today, but we don't really know about it because of what would happen later. So understand, we're talking 1884. You have the Berlin Conference. You have all these same countries, right? Pay attention to the names of these countries. These are the same countries that was involved in what? World War II, right? Same countries. So now you have this whole battle. Ethiopia defeats Rome. But then remember, Britain is remaining in Egypt. You will have later on, Mussolini will come into power. We know what happened with Mussolini in Egypt. Mussolini, and all of this was about the Suez Canal, as we already know. The Suez Canal is a very important strip of land, or let's just say waterway, for trade. And now we're in this industrial revolution where trade is everything and stuff is moving. Who owns the Suez Canal makes a lot of money. So Britain is there to basically hold on to that territory because the person that they put in power, because that's what happens. They put people in power and you think, how can you conquer a land and then all of a sudden the people are running it and people think, okay, that it's over, and that's what people are thinking because you look at the ruler, the leadership, and it looks like you. This is what they do. They always instill a person. So the person that Britain put in charge of running Egypt basically wasn't doing his job, and Britain had to still come there. Remember, we know Egypt basically got its independence in 1922, and that the military power of Britain remained until the 1950s, right? Because of what Mussolini would do later on. So Mussolini would go into Ethiopia and conquer that shit, right? Around the 1940s, I believe, 1930s, and the 1930s, what have you. So Mussolini would basically come in there, take over very easily, of course, because they drop, chemical weapons on these people. They drop bombs on these people. And Haile Selassie was forced to flee. You guys know the story. And Mussolini would basically take over in Ethiopia and, head towards Egypt. So now you have Italy, Mussolini, fighting the French and the British in Egypt, right? So again, understand, before this, these people were just together at the Berlin Conference saying what? We need to divide up Africa. So to you, you're looking at this as kingdom versus kingdom, or government versus government, but it's not. Because the people who are at that conference are not fighting. You are, the people are. And that's how the game is played. See, we think when we go to war against these nations, it's the nation versus the nation. No, this shit is for looks, man. They don't care how many people die. It's how you play the game.